What's that?
Check it on the piano. We can do some tunes.
If you know how to play the piano, then yeah.
Yeah, I didn't bring my. Hold on, I got my iReal Pro, right? I got all the changes for it. What are you gonna play?
A nigun.
What?
A nigun.
On Nigun. The Chabad in Tel Aviv on Mount George. They're doing like a jazz thing on Monday nights. I was just there last month.
Okay.
Chabad's turned their Chabad house into a jazz club on Monday nights. It's great.
Oh, fantastic. I don't really go to Chabad houses, but if I would
No. There was Breslauers there. I tell you.
It was mixed.
It was mixed. Yeah, it was mixed dancing. I tell you.
Yeah. So that's good? Okay.
Cody, when we finish taping this down, I'm going to have you unblank for a second so we can make sure that we didn't lose the connection.
I'll repeat myself. I was just didn't know if you guys were finished.
Yeah, no, you're good. It is done. Thank you.
Please start taking your seats. We'll be starting in 2 minutes. Please come join us and take a seat.
How dare you? All right, Cody, go ahead and unblank for a moment so we can make sure our connection is good. Great. Thank you. And yeah, the cue will be obvious because, well, actually, let me check real fast. When it's time for this address, do you want like me to come press play?
You know what? I'll say yes live in case there's a glitch.
Love
If
that.
you're okay with that, I want you to do. You're already like here.
I will take care of it.
I didn't think there was a higher, but I think
No
right.
problem.
This woman is amazing, and you've got a team, and they know what to do.
You
and
are so nice. You are too nice.
No. I just can't believe what you handled today. Really.
Thank you so
and
much.
It's only 3:30.
And
And
now,
it's been a lifetime. I know now it's smooth sailing, but like you've done a lot today.
thank
So
you. That's very
I'm
kind
very
of you.
appreciative, and it's all good. I hope you guys are eating and drinking.
No, we are good. You are
Are
good.
you eating and drinking?
I will be.
Okay, good. Please help yourself.
Yes. We're good. You're good. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. We want to get everyone seated so we can continue with our program. If you're standing, grab a seat. Hi, everyone. Please grab a seat. We would like to get started. And to those on the live stream, sorry we're running just a few minutes late. We hope you stick with us. And we appreciate you being there. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our afternoon plenary. We appreciate everyone who's been here since early in the morning. We appreciate those on the live stream, and we appreciate everyone who just joined us. Thank you for being with us. We've heard interesting, fascinating, challenging, beautiful words, and I'm sure the second plenary is going to offer more thoughtful and meaningful conversations. I just want to give a little bit of a landscape of what we're going to do. I am not here to speak yet. We're going to open with a special address by Rabbi Saul Berman. It will be followed without intros and bios by our friend and saxophone great, Yoni Kretzmer, and followed after that by a short address by video from Chaver Knesset member, Rav Gilad Kariv, who was going to be with us and, like many of other speakers, wasn't able to make it from Israel. We are very honored to have Rabbi Berman here with us. Rabbi Berman was ordained by Yeshiva University and earned a JD from NYU Law School and an MA in political science from UC Berkeley. He pursued advanced studies of Jewish law at Hebrew University and Tel Aviv University. He was a rabbi at Berkeley, Brookline, Lincoln Square Synagogue here in Manhattan, where many of us saw him. He was a leader in the Soviet Jewry movement and twice arrested in Selma in 1965 during the voter registration effort. Since 1971, he has taught at Stern College, and since 1990 at Columbia Law School, specializing in Jewish law and ethics. Rabbi Berman.
Can I take this away from here, or this has to be up here? Does this computer have to be up here, or is it not needed now?
Oh, it's connected. Sorry. We need it for later.
What? You need it for later? Can I just take off the tape and you'll tape it back on?
Sure. Oh, yeah. Great.
Thank you, Esther. Your 2 minutes do not count to my time. I have much more to say than I can possibly say in the few minutes that have been allotted to me. So you'll excuse me if I appear to be outlining some things, but I think that I have a number of things to contribute for your deliberation over the course of the balance of the time that we'll be together today and thereafter. I deeply appreciated the passion that was evident in the earlier session today, and particularly the impassioned plea of Gregory Khalil. I heard him saying something that Rav Soloveitchik wrote, believe it or not, in 1956. Rav Soloveitchik, in his essay called "The Dofek," spoke of the knocks of the beloved, and the fifth knock, he said, is perhaps the most important of all. For the first time in the history of our exile, divine providence has surprised our enemies with the sensational discovery that Jewish blood is not free for the taking, is not hefker, that dam Yehudi eino hefker. He then went on to say that if anti-Semites wish to describe this phenomenon as an eye for an eye, so be it. We will agree with them. If we wish to heroically defend our national historical existence, we must at times interpret the verse "an eye for an eye" literally. How many eyes did we lose during the course of our bitter exile because we did not return blows? The time has come for us to fulfill the law of self-defense. And what I heard in Gregory's talk, when he was crying essentially for the Palestinian voice to be heard, is a similar cry, as was the cry of Black Lives Matter. And unfortunately, I heard many Jews saying, Black Lives Matter? Only Black Lives Matter? Nobody ever said only Black Lives Matter. And we should have rather heard in that a recognition that obviously all human lives matter. Obviously, if we were all created in the image of God, all human lives matter. But there are particular moments in time when the life of a particular segment of the population matters, and we have to be willing to call that out when that is the case, right? I've been wearing this particular, it has earlier, things. This is, anyone recognize this band? Darfur, it's a Darfur band. I've been wearing this since the inauguration of Bush Jr., right? I've been wearing this, not the same one. I mean, this one I stapled together and taped because it sort of fell apart already. And I have some others around someplace in the house I wasn't able to find. But when there is a particular population which is under threat, it's appropriate to call for remedies to that threat. And so I appreciated that passion. At the same time, I did not appreciate the assertion that somehow the Jewish passion for Israel need not be heard. I didn't appreciate the sense that that the theological root of Zionism is the source of horror and enmity and evil. It is not. It is also a call for the Jewish voice to be heard and for Jewish history to be vindicated. And we have to be able to hear both of those voices simultaneously. And what I felt was wrong with that first panel was that the Jewish voice for vindication within Israel and with Israel was not heard in that. And while I respect the depth of passion for the Palestinian cause and for Palestinian lives and for the lives of, tragically, the thousands of lives that were lost in Gaza, and I'll come back to that shortly, I don't appreciate the fact that it is asserted as if that is simply the consequence of a Jewish passion to control territory instead of a conflict between two theologies which are deeply each loving but at the same time deeply committed to their own fulfillment. And no one can deny that the history of Jewish claims to the land of Israel goes back almost 4,000 years now. And no one can deny that the history of Islam is filled with the notion of Dar al-Islam, the claim that any territory that was at any point in time under the sovereignty of an Islamic state can never, from their perspective, be acceptably under the sovereignty of any other state. And that theological position within Islam is fundamentally at the root of the incapacity of the Islamic world to recognize the rights of Israel to exist as a Jewish state. And that therefore the insistence that it not be a Jewish state, it can be maybe a binational state, but it shouldn't really be a state of Jews altogether, is rooted deeply in the theology of Islam and is taught actively by imams all over the world, including here in the United States. Except I understand now, no longer in Saudi Arabia. Why no longer in Saudi Arabia? Because the imams in Saudi Arabia were informed that if they continue teaching that, they're going to be killed. So I don't think we should take that kind of a step, either with people who are teaching that Zionism calls for us to control as much of the land as we can possibly control, nor for Muslims who are disrupted in their theological convictions, as the Catholic Church had been until 1965, by the very idea that there could be a Jewish state. And much as the Catholic Church was able to come to terms with the idea that there could be a Jewish state without its necessarily undermining the whole of their conviction in the truth of Catholicism and their belief in salvation, that Jews have certainly come to that conclusion, right? I mean, Rav Soloveitchik, the same person who spoke in Kol Odi Dofek about that it was important for the world to learn that Dam Yehudi eino hefker. That same Rav Soloveitchik, after the war in 1967, declared that all of those rabbis who were then claiming that it was impermissible according to Jewish law to return any inch of that property taken to Arab sovereignty because of the law of Lo Tachanem, because the Torah's prohibition stated in relation to the 7 Canaanite nations that they should not be permitted to be rooted in the land. Rav Soloveitchik insisted that that claim was a false claim, that there was no halachic barrier to the government of Israel entering into a compromise over territory in what the government of Israel would deem to be the greater interest of the state of Israel and of its citizens. And it took approximately 4 years after that for almost every one of the Gedolei Torah who had paskin lahalacha that it was impermissible to give back 1 inch of territory, it took approximately 4 years for virtually every one of them to back off that. They then made up other excuses for why they were opposed to territorial compromise. But they could no longer say that theologically or that halachically it was impermissible to enter into a territorial compromise in order to be able to achieve peace with the Arab nations amongst whom we were living. I'm also deeply appreciative of the Gregory is not here anymore, so I can't talk to him myself. You'll have to convey my message to him about that. All right. Is Amira still here? She left also. I'm sorry. So Amira's voice, Amira Hass's voice, raised for the weakest segments of society which Israel has had to deal with almost in its entire history as a state. Her voice has been extraordinarily important. And her fury is important for all of us to hear. But again, to lay the roots of the conflict between Jews and Arabs, and for the inability of Jews and Arabs together to settle those problems, to lay that fully at the hands of Jews and fully at the hands of the government of the state of Israel, no matter which government it was. Because there are imperfections in every government, and there are imperfections in every people. And to lay all of the roots of a controversy this intense at the feet of some rather than at the feet of all. And for the fact that nobody had mentioned in that entire session, Gregory claimed that 20 years before it happened, right, already in 2006, they were able to foresee the end, right? They were able to foresee October 7th. They were able to foresee everything that was going to happen. I don't think anybody was ever able to foresee. But if you foresaw that, then within your own society, could you not have prevented that? Could you not have worked then on preventing the grossest violations of international law, even in guerrilla warfare, right? Taking hostages is illegal in international law. Killing prisoners of war is a violation of international law. Hiding weapons in schools and hospitals is against international law. Shielding military personnel in churches or mosques is a violation of international law. And teaching a whole generations of Muslim children to hate Israel and to hate Jews is not against international law, but is there anyone here who thinks that that does not impact on what the next generation is going to have to confront in their attempts to arrive at peace? I remember, I was in Selma in 1965, right around at this time of the year. I was in jail on Purim, and after I got out of jail, there was Shabbat, and then Sunday was the march from Selma to Montgomery. And I was, you know that Martin Luther King had made a deal with President Johnson to limit the number of people who would engage in that march. And I was not fortunate enough to be one of those chosen to go on the march, but I could walk right up to the Peter's Bridge, right? I could walk right up to the bridge. Everybody could do that. So I did that Sunday morning, and I marched right up to the Peter's Bridge. And as I was marching, I noticed a car off in the distance. There was a young couple standing at either end of the car, and there were two little kids hanging out of the window of the car. So I figured, you know, it's wonderful. These people are bringing their children there to see the birth of a new era, right? The birth of a new era. And as I got closer, I realized that I was not hearing the sounds about the birth of a new era. Instead, what I was hearing, particularly as I happened to be walking right next to them, arm in arm with a black person on either side of me, for those two children to scream out of the windows of that car. I won't repeat the obscenities that they were saying, but with it came, you are betraying your race. You effing can imagine. You're betraying your race. And I was struck dumb. And my instant response was, no, can't be. Not yet another generation of children are going to be raised with that kind of hatred in their hearts? Really? Is that what's going to happen? Now, I'm certain that if Israel had attempted to take control of the schools in the Palestinian territories and to avoid that kind of hatred from being transmitted in the schools, Israel would have been accused of cultural suppression, right? Okay. So let me get to the point that I want to make. That was all introduction. I have a minute. Thank you. I just presented earlier a biblical perspective on immigration. There was one more piece of it that I did not introduce, and that is a critical piece of the Torah's treatment of immigrants is that they too are bearers of duties, not only rights. The Torah guaranteed the rights of immigrants to the protection of their lives, the protection of their persons, of their bodies, right? Protection from rape and other forms of bodily injury, protection of their property, the grant of full legal recourse to deal with any challenge to their persons or their property or anything else, and even guaranteed their emotional security. The Torah guaranteed them all of those, but it did not guarantee them by their direct grant of rights. It guaranteed them by asserting that those were the duties of every individual Jewish citizen. That no Jewish citizen had the right, and no Jewish government had the right to deprive immigrants of those forms of protection. And indeed, that those five, with one more, including spiritual protection, that those guarantees of protection are in fact the paradigm for the guarantees that every citizen is entitled to. And that the deprivation of those rights is innately a criminal offense according to the Torah. And we have the right to demand that of the government of Israel. We have the right to demand that of the government of the United States, of governments for which we bear responsibility. But most of all, we have the duty to demand those kinds of actions of ourselves. And if we want to achieve peace, then it's precisely by accepting not that somebody else has rights with an unstated person owing them duties, but if we shift to the language of Torah, to the language of duties, and if we and Arabs together with us, we and Muslims together with us, agree that human dignity is dependent upon our all undertaking those as fundamental duties of ourselves and of our governments, and simply working not on solving the big problem, but work on seeing to it that we as individuals and we acting through our governments actually fulfill those duties, then I believe we have a fighting chance of leaving a world to our children which will be substantially better than the one which we appear now to be leaving as our heritage to them. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Rabbi Berman, for being here with us today. We invited you to speak about immigration, and you expressed other views. And we appreciate hearing them. And just as organizers of Smol Emuni, we want to say that we respectfully disagree, but we're very glad to have you here with us. We're going to move now into some music. We're going to move now into some music. I invite everyone to kind of listen and process and be in community together. Thank you. Yoni.
וחברות יקרים, dear friends, עשהטוב. Greetings from Israel and apologies for not being able to join you in New York on account of the war that has shaken up Israel, the region, and the entire world. The war that once again reaffirms not only the importance of our joint efforts, but their utmost necessity. I do not wish to mince words in a moment when clarity is in dire need. The Iranian Ayatollah regime is a murderous and oppressive threat to all those who believe in the sanctity and equality of human life, and the world will be a safer place without it. At the same time, and regrettably, unlike most of our partners in the Israeli political opposition, we are steadfast in our position that this war started at a moment when public trust in the Israeli government is at its lowest, must be short, decisive, and end in international and regional agreements. Our government showed its ability and desire to start a military campaign against Iran and its proxies. Due to its fanatic elements, it lacks the ability and the desire to end wars and to move from the military stage to the needed and critical political stage. We also need to be crystal clear in our cry against raging settler violence in the West Bank, supported by the fanatics in government, whose aim is to drive Palestinians from their land. Jewish supremacy and violence are illegal, immoral, and must be rooted out of Israeli society. It goes against all that we believe in as humanists, as Jews, and as Zionists. This violence does not stand alone. It is part of a well-planned effort to lead a de facto annexation in the West Bank, an effort which is fully supported and organized by the government. Again, our biggest enemy is the public ignorance and apathy, and our biggest tool is our voice and our moral devotion. The next months will be crucial for the future of Israeli society and also the future of the Jewish people. The upcoming elections will decide the very soul of Israel, whether we rebuild it as a liberal democracy with equality for all citizens and work toward peaceful resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict while seeking to broaden our relations with neighboring countries, or will Israel continue to backslide into theocracy and Zionism, becoming an isolated Sparta at constant war? In this critical time, the voice of the Smol Emuni and the relationship between those who believe in peace inside and outside Israel is needed more than ever. While we strive to be the moral backbone for the opposition, our dear partners from Smol Emuni must see themselves as Amud Ha'esh, the pillar of fire before Israeli society and Jewish communities around the world, to call out injustice and to advocate for peace and equality. Those who stand against us try to create a false notion that we are a small minority among Israelis and in the Jewish people. Our task is to help a huge Israeli and Jewish audience to recapture their voice, to move from being a silent majority to be an active political and ideological camp and movement. Education, public advocacy, communal work, and political involvement are not only liberal and democratic concepts, they are deeply, deeply rooted in our Jewish tradition and heritage. This last Shabbat, we read the special maftir of Shabbat Para. Today, unfortunately, in Israel, there are forceful religious and political groups that read this maftir as a call for practical steps to restore the ancient temple. We choose to read this same maftir as a reminder of the Jewish commitment to Chaim, the sanctity of life, and to identify human death and destruction as the main source of Tum'ah. Our joint holy work will determine which Jewish reading will shape the face of our faith and people in the 21st century, in Israel and around the world. With hope and with faith, we will strive to fix that which has been broken and to fulfill the promise of Israel as a light upon nations after all the darkness of these last years. We will overcome, we will prevail. Adonai oz le'amo iten, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom.
Do you want me sitting, standing? Good afternoon. We're gathered here at this closing panel of this conference to talk about the work of עשהטוב, of making constructive, positive change within our community and communities. There is a great deal that we can say to other communities about the work that we think they need to do. That is a very comfortable place for us to be, and a lot of us are used to hearing a lot of conversations within our communities and spaces about what work others need to do in order to secure the work of moving forward to a better world. Today, we are here not to do that easier and more comfortable work of telling other communities what they need to do in order to move forward, but to do the harder, more introspective, more difficult, maybe more painful work of talking about what we as a community think that we need to do to move forward, what עשהטוב we can aspire to, commit ourselves to, and how we can look to work towards it. And so we are going to begin now hearing from our four panelists. I do not want to belabor long biographies, and so I'm going to call on them one at a time. Each one can introduce herself or himself briefly to you and share their opening statement about what they see, about where we are, and how we can move forward. And then we will hope to have some interesting, fruitful, and generative discussion, and cards are being passed out or will be passed out. Nope. Microphones will be passed out for questions from the audience. No cards, microphones for questions from the audience. And so I'm going to ask Rabbi Sharon Brous to open for us.
Thank you, everyone. First of all, it's really an honor to be here. I wasn't able to be in person last year, and it feels a little bit like a homecoming because the beginning of my rabbinate was here at BJ, right on this pulpit, and so I'm very grateful to be here among so many beloved friends and teachers, and so thank you all. I want to share that I just came from Chicago for the funeral of the Reverend Jesse Jackson, and I was asked by the family to speak about his relationship with the Jewish community, which changed and was really transformed over the course of time. As Abe Foxman wrote in a piece that some of you may have seen, the Jesse Jackson of our time was not the Jesse Jackson of 1984. And what I really learned as I read and studied and thought of the many conversations that I had had with him was that people change and grow. And that forgiveness is possible, and in fact, healing is possible. And so I want to start by just lifting up this rainbow vision of America, which is an America that is as attuned to anti-Black racism and anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and all kinds of hatred against all kinds of people, with the recognition that the only way that any of us will really be safe and free is when all of us are safe and free together. That vision of collective liberation is also obviously so central and so critical to this conversation. There's no zero-sum analysis that will work in the Israel-Palestine conversation, and I think that that's the reason that we're all here now, because we recognize that we all have work to do in our own communities. And I feel very honored to be in a position where I'm able to do some of that work within my own. Okay, on that note, I'm going to share with you very briefly a Talmudic story that I have been focused on for many years, that I keep coming back to, that I think really helps me understand who we're called to be in this time of so much moral confusion. It's a very strange story that comes from Masechet Yoma 23a. It's the story of two Kohanim who are racing up a ramp in order to participate in the sacred work on Har HaBayit at the Temple Mount. And there used to be a kind of friendly competition among Kohanim because there was only enough work for one person to do, and so they would race each other there. Some of you know this story well. And at some point in this utterly horrible turn of events, one of the two Kohanim, the one who's in the back, pulls out his sacrificial knife and drives it through the heart of his brother who's in front of him. And the first Kohen falls to the ground and is writhing in pain and is clearly going to die. And at this point, a rabbi named Rabbi Tzadok stands up and calls out to all of the priests, to all of the leadership, and to all of the people of Jerusalem, and essentially says to them, who is responsible for this murder? What he doesn't say is the guy with the knife. Everybody knows that guy's responsible. He says, is it the Kohanim who created a culture of competition that would inevitably lead to violence? Or perhaps it's all of the people of Yerushalayim, all of the people of this city who allowed a culture of hatred and violence to fester so that one day one might pick up a knife and drive it through the heart of another. And his words are so provocative and evocative and compelling that the people of Yerushalayim burst into tears. And it seems like it's possible that this is a moment of transformation. And were it not for the fact that the father of the dying priest on the ground then runs up to that near-dead body, this could have been a transformational moment in Jewish history. But the father runs up, pulls the knife out of his son's back and says, don't worry, people, the knife is still kosher. And the rabbis indicate to us that this story tells us what was so sick and perverse and distorted in that time, that our people cared more about the kashrut, about the purity of their ritual objects than they cared even about human life. And lest you think it's just the rabbis reflecting on the priests, on the Kohanim, they do exactly the same thing when it comes to rabbinic leadership as well. In Masechet Gitzin, story after story after story of the reason why the temple was destroyed, and each time it points to their own moral failure, because the rabbis forgot that they were called to be moral leaders and instead engaged in a kind of obscene moral passivity that led the way to the birth of extremism, that led the way to catastrophe for our people. Now, when Rachel and Esther and Rivka asked me to share for just a few moments, I said I can speak briefly, and I promise it will be hopeful, even though those are the two stories I want to bring us to. And the reason that this is hopeful is because if the failure of moral leadership, the failure of the attachment of ritual and religious practice to moral agency is what led to our destruction before, then the realignment of our moral and spiritual lives can actually save us from catastrophe now. And that means that every single one of us is called to use our Jewish moral intuition and to reweave together our moral and spiritual selves so that we collectively can offer a different vision of what is possible. This is not just about the future of the state of Israel. This is about the soul of the Jewish people. This is about actually saving and ultimately redeeming the soul of the Jewish people. So I want to go back to that moment with Rabbi Tzadok, that moment when it almost all changed, when people spoke the truth, a person spoke the truth, and the people felt it in the core of their being, and they wept, and they prepared to change. And I want for us to imagine that we are those people now, and that through our sacred tears, through engaging with this difficult reckoning work that you're inviting us into, which we so desperately need, the hard stuff I'm talking about, that we collectively can choose a different course. I fully believe that to be possible in the days ahead. We absolutely have no other choice.
Thank you, Rabbi. Mr. Mickey Gitzin.
Hi. Thank you, everyone. as Rabbi Brous just said, it's really great to be here. So many people that I planned to meet during my time in New York just were here, and I got to meet them. My name is Miki Gitzin, and I'm the acting CEO of the New Israel Fund. I'm an Israeli, as you can hear, and I'm kind of like feeling the burden of representing many Israeli voices that should have been here but couldn't be here. But actually, one of the great privileges of my work as leading the New Israel Fund is being in constant touch and relationship with people that make change, that not only believe that change is possible, but actually wake up every morning to build a movement of people that look at the horrific present in which we live. And I think definitely after the first session, there is no need to speak more about how horrific is the reality in which we live. Definitely in Israel and Palestine, in this country, in other places. But I think that my main job in the last 8 years as the leader of the New Israel Fund in Israel, but actually now even more so, is open up the framework in which we look at reality. It's really, really easy, and it's almost mandatory to look at what has happened in Gaza, at what happened just yesterday in the West Bank. 3 Palestinians were killed, assassinated by Israeli settlers wearing Israeli IDF uniforms. It's really hard to be looking at this reality and not just to fall into despair. But my job, and that will be also my job on this panel, is to open up the frame a bit and say, look at this horrific reality. There are so many amazing people that are working work to change this reality. And they're not doing it in an easy environment. Believe me, I felt it myself on my own, my own personal story, being attacked by so many. They do it against very, very passionate, very, very passionate. I'm choosing the word carefully because I don't want to fall in the world, but extreme, ultra-nationalist actors in our society that have made a decision to make Israel an ultra-national state which doesn't fall into any of the elements of what Israel should have been. And we're talking about people who do protective presence in the West Bank now, when reality is even scarier than ever. We're talking about people that march and walk on the streets of Tel Aviv. We're talking about the people that actually were able to bring the hostages back from Gaza with their voices and struggle. And why am I telling you this story? Because you know it, right? Everyone who sits in this room knows personally people who are part of the struggle. Because the question that I'm asking ourselves is, so what's the role of this room? What can you actually do in times in which Israeli society fights for its soul? And when I talk about Israelis, just to be clear, I'm talking about Jews and Palestinians standing side by side, not boycotting each other, but working together to change the reality on the ground. And what can this room do about it? That's the question that actually I need to ask myself, both in my job, but also as a human being that spends his time here in the US currently. We need your support, not as a community, and I've heard the word community coming, as a political action of this group. Not look at us and say, you're not doing enough, and we could have done it better, or something could have changed and went completely into a different direction. We need support. We need to have people who say, we have your back. We're part of your struggle. Because one of the things that are the hardest and the most kind of like painful in any political activism is to feel like you do it alone, that you don't really represent voices of true people. And this room can and should be a voice of action, a political community, not just a religious or social community, a political community that support the people on the ground that do the work. Because it's really, really easy in times of pain to turn your back, to look at your family, close ones, as the people that went into the wrong directions. And I can tell you myself, part of my family had turned into a wrong direction. But the last thing that I want to do is turn my back. So the one thing that I actually offer you to do is look at the people that you can see as partners and work with them not only as a community, but as people, as part of your political action. And I think those are many, and member of Knesset Gilad Kariv has mentioned in the coming elections, but it's not only that. It's the day-to-day life of the struggle over the soul of the state of Israel, of Jews and Palestinians living there, and to be honest, it's also the soul of the Jewish people in the same way. So thank you.
Thank you. Rabbi Chaim Seidler-Feller.
I have a general comment that relates in some ways to what Rabbi Berman said, because there's some agreement between us. And that is what I look for at these conferences and in engagement with people who come together with different positions is honesty, transparency, and as part of that, most importantly, self-criticism. I'm judgmental. If I don't hear someone, whether Jew or Palestinian, being critical of their own movement, then I know there's something missing. And there's been something missing, or there was. So I take that very seriously as a responsibility that I have and that all have. Whether one is victim or victimizer, we all have responsibility and we all have agency no matter what our particular position. So that's an introductory comment. In 1824, writing to Moses Moser, Heinrich Heine included his poem To Edom, which reads, "For millennia now, as brothers, we've borne with each other in age. You bear the fact I'm still breathing, and I bear your rage. But often you got into strange tempers in dark times since the flood, and your meekly loving talons, you died in my red blood. And now our friendship grows firmer and daily increases anew. For I too have started raging. I'm becoming much like you." Indeed, we've forgotten that the biblical blessing, Al Charbacha Tichyeh, you shall live by the sword, by might and violence, was originally granted to Esau, to Esav. And in a fit of jealousy, we have once again stolen his blessing and lifted our swords to heaven in the implementation of our version of divine vengeance. But the Jewish way is not the way of the sword. We do, after all, proudly refer to ourselves as Am HaSefer, the people of the book. As if to confirm this descent from a values-based tradition, to a nation obsessed with power and violence, close friends in Israel, decent, religious, fair-minded, and highly educated people, sent me the following greeting on Purim. I shudder as I read the words, really. Quote, "In place of Mishloach Manot," hold on to your seats, "a bomb has been dropped in Tehran in your honor. Purim Sameach." What an obscene perversion. A sickness has overtaken the religious Zionist community. The engagement in and the celebration of violence, of might, kochi v'otzem yadi, my power and the might of my hands, in our name and in the name of God. And for the religious Zionist community, I know I said this last year as well, right, we've replaced God as the central belief with the central belief in Israel. Israel has replaced God as the central belief of Judaism. Lo zu haderech. We can no longer sit idly by. Judaism itself has been sullied. To the world at large, it appears as if Judaism supports the massacre of innocents, the stealing of land and sheep, the burning of homes, the uprooting of olive trees, and the murder of children. We cannot allow this to continue. I can only yell Gewalt. We have to save Judaism. What can be done? No, what must be done? Apart from the discussion that we just had in the breakout room on Eretz Kulam, a land for all, which is a practical approach with a program for resolution of the conflict, I want to focus on what needs to be the central, most important response from the religious Zionist community, from the Jewish community, and that's a complete revision of the religious Zionist or the general Zionist educational curriculum on the basis of a programmatic formulation that was presented by Jonathan Sachs. He wrote, Zionism Phase 1 avers it gave back to Jewry what it lacked in dispersion, sovereignty and a state. That we've achieved. That was the goal of political Zionism. But that's not all. Zionism Phase 2, he continues, must reappropriate what Jewry had when it lacked a state, namely a profound sense of responsibility to the weak, the poor, the socially marginalized, the neglected, and the unheard. This must become the focus of a renewed Zionism. The challenge, then, for a revitalized religious Zionism is to build a society worthy of being a home for the divine presence by honoring the divine image of all the inhabitants of the land. Our task moving forward is to uphold a Zionism of values centered on ethics over and against the manifest Zionism of power. We must draw on those sources of our tradition that direct us away from the ecstasy of cataclysmic, magical, messianic delusions and move on to the staid fulfillment of our human responsibility. Gradual change. Move away from demonization of the other to the humanization of our brother. Move away from the depraved dream of Jewish supremacy to the practical halakha, Jewish law, of chukah achat, one law for all, for Jews and Palestinians, equality and dignity. Let me remind you that Rav Amital, who was the head of the yeshiva in Alon Shvut, declared that the Israeli Declaration of Independence has normative status. We should all, if we care, hang up in our salons the Declaration of Independence and every day read the paragraph that says that Israel obligates itself to equality of all its citizens and to live by the spirit of the prophets of Israel. And ask ourselves every day, how are we doing? How are we doing in this standard that we have raised as our standard, not external to ourselves? How are we living up to what we aspire to? And make judgment and progress on the basis of that judgment. And in Rav Amiel's words, move away from a tzionut shel sin'ah, a Zionism of hatred, to a tzionut shel chibah, to a Zionism of love. Let me remind you of how I ended last year. I won't tell you the whole story, but what I said was in the town where the watches broke down, one guy kept unwinding the watches. When the watchmaker came, that was the only watch he could repair. We must keep on winding. Keep on talking about peace. If we stop talking about peace, we stop believing in peace. We have an obligation, and the situation has a claim on us to respond. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Eman Ansari.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Rivka. Thank you, Tirza. My fellow panelists, organizers of Smol Emuni Second Annual Congress, and my friends,
I have friends who came all the way from Boston, Julia and Noam. I have Barbara here. And I have Neil and his wife Helen, my fellow trustee at the Arava Institute. Thank you for welcoming me into this space, for opening your minds, your hearts, and your community to hear my voice. I stand before you today as a Palestinian, Arab, Muslim. I'm the daughter of 1948 survivors from Safad and Haifa. I'm the wife of a Jerusalemites whose family has been living there for the past 1,389 years and counting. Ansari family are the guardians of the Aqsa Mosque, only one family. It was very easy to find them when I first went there. I'm also the mother of 4 children who, like generations before them, will always call that land home. My story is not unique. It echoes millions of others. I was raised far from Palestine. I was raised in Saudi Arabia, a country was mentioned earlier. I was raised with deep pride for being Arab. I'm Arab. I memorized the poetry, I read the literature. It's the language of mathematics, physics. I love being Arab, very proud of it. I was also raised with a pride for being Muslim. I memorized the Quran, the only competitions we could do growing up in Saudi Arabia as girls. Like, I couldn't swim, I couldn't bike, I couldn't do a lot of stuff. So my competitions were always like competitions in memorizing Quran. And I had to ace them. So at the end, by the age of 13, I had memorized Quran. And with a very deep pride for being Palestinian. We are a people of resilience, high education, culture, contribution wherever we live. We come from a land of the prophets, of rich culture, of food, art, music, dance that carry memory across generations. I have always said it with immense pride and with a smile on my face. I am Palestinian. When I came to the United States, I was the top of my class in medical school. I got a scholarship to come to the US. I knew where to go. I wanted to go, where is the best university? Harvard. I wanted to go to Boston. I was warned. Everyone begged me, never say you're a Palestinian. They worried that a lot of people harbored maybe similar views to Rabbi Berman and would not like me. Maybe they will put obstacles in my way. And some may wish me dead. It's a chant. A good Arab is a dead Arab. But I don't listen, typically. I was told women are not smart, and I didn't believe them. I was told that women can't be doctors, and I didn't believe them. And I was told that all Jews would not like me, and I didn't believe them. So I discovered that there are so many Jews who liked me, so many Jews who championed me, so many Israelis who liked me, Julia and Noam. And I discovered something very profound, that many of our foundational narratives can be changed. I discovered something that was completely different from what I was raised to believe. I was raised to believe that Jews will never like me, and that was not true. Recent history placed our peoples on different sides of a painful tragedy that began in modern era. This is not an existential war. This is not an existential hate. This is not a fight between two religions. This started precisely August 29th to 31st, 1897, the moment the decision was made to basically have Palestine as a Jewish majority state. That decision resulted in the expulsion of my family, in mowing the lawn in Gaza, and in a lot of what we see in the West Bank right now. This tragedy is shaped by fear, trauma, displacement, competing national aspirations. Acknowledging that history, including the suffering of both peoples, is essential if we are to move forward. We started the conference today with thoughtful words about our people in Palestine and our people in Israel and people in Iran. But I'm going to tell you that my parents in Saudi Arabia are terrified. My sisters in Dubai are terrified. People in Qatar, my cousins in Qatar, are terrified. My family in Lebanon, they are in such terrible shape. I don't know if you're watching the news. In Syria, they're terrified. In Jordan, they're terrified. The entire region is in a status of terror and fear. And by the way, they don't have shelters. So the question before us is not who suffered more or whose history matters more, but how we move from pain to possibility. As a physician, I am trained to ask one guiding question in moments of crisis. I'm a pediatrician, pediatric intensivist. If this were my child, what would I want done? That question dissolves ideology and reveals our shared humanity. I invite you to do the same. Put yourselves in my shoes, your fellow human. My hope is simple, and I'm going to echo a word that everyone had said so far. Choose. My hope is that we can choose empathy and justice over fear, decency over dominance and supremacy, coexistence over perpetual greed. That we can see one another not as enemies or abstractions, but as human beings, as parents, as children, neighbors, each deserving equal dignity, justice, safety, freedom, and a future. Palestine will always be our homeland to which we will return. Palestine will always be your homeland as well. It's not a matter of if, but a matter of when everyone will realize that it's the only safe way forward for our peoples. And before I end, which I plan to end here, I wanted to address Rabbi Berman and tell him, it's not my people versus your people. It's our people. We are one tribe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dr. Ansari brings down the house. Okay, we're going to try a few questions up here for the panel, and then we can open it up to questions from the room. The first thing I want to say is that if we're going to go right to the painful heart of the matter, a number of the panelists have talked about the need for introspection, self-reflection, making change within our own communities, rather than identifying other people who may need to make change. But then when we identify the places where we need to make change, it is in parts of the Jewish community that we do not, in fact, identify or affiliate with. So it's really still not making change in our community. It's just a different not our. It's not, I'm going to tell the Palestinians how they need to make changes. It's going to be, I'm going to tell other groups of Jews or Israelis how they need to make changes. And so I want to ask the question on both sides. I want to ask the question both, what work do we see in terms of עשהטוב, in terms of positive moving forward in our own communities and the communities with which we identify and that we are a part of? And also, what practical agency do we see that we have making change within a broader Jewish community in this country and in Israel, where our voices may place us outside right now of a broader communal consensus? So I'll open up that question to whomever would like to take it.
So I did mention I'm not an elementary educator. I believe that we have to go to the basics. We need to go to Jewish schools, and this across the board, both in day schools, Hebrew schools, camps. How are young Jews educated about Israel? And we have to be able to present them with something very different from what they've learned, because they haven't learned anything about the Palestinians, for sure. They haven't learned that there are two peoples who have a rightful claim to the land. Most of them haven't learned that. There is in existence in Israel a dual curriculum, right? You know about that. It was in force when Yuli Tamir was the Minister of Education, and then it was removed. It exists as a textbook. We have a dual narrative. People can learn. We haven't even begun. We haven't begun the process of trying to teach people how to accept the reality that there are two peoples living there. So I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done by all of us who care. We have access to education committees. We have access to synagogue boards, to organizations. Do we know that? Do we even think? I hope that it's a possibility that the two peoples can live side by side. Number one, I want to say one more thing, and that is, I personally, my program is that we have to use our own sources as a way of responding to the inequities that have emerged politically. And I want to give you an example, which I cut out of my talk so that I could present it now, and that is from yesterday's Torah portion. Right? Why did Moses break the tablets? Moses shattered the tablets, says Rav Meir Simcha, because he understood that if the people are worshiping the golden calf, if I give them the tablets, they're going to worship the tablets, and they're going to make them into an idol. So the principle that we learn from that passage and the shattering of the tablets and the worship of the golden calf, in the wake of the worship of the golden calf, is that no thing is essentially holy. Not the tablets crafted by God, and not the land promised to us. On the contrary, fetishization of the land is itself idolatry. These are fundamental teachings. This is a Jewish teaching. We have the tools to turn around education in a way that supports a different reality. We have to access those tools and not give up. What I see happening in the community is we've given up. We can't say the word Zionism. It's a dirty word. Own it. Own it with pride. It allowed us to create something alive. Is there injustice in the state of Israel? It's a state. States do bad things. We should know that. And we should work for change, not give up. To give up is to add more evil and destruction in a situation that needs building forward, not moving backward.
I want to go back to your question about where we are planting the self-criticism, and there was a video that I saw a couple of days ago that some of you, I'm sure, saw, that was shot by a Palestinian. You can see the Jeep approaching, and then two guys get out with these wooden poles and just start beating the person who's holding the camera. And you can just hear his voice, and he's saying, "Lo, lo, lo, bevakasha lo, bevakasha lo." And it just like fell to the ground in tears when I saw this video, and like the revival of the Hebrew language, you know, thinking about like the miracle of the establishment of the state and what it means for us, and to see this, to see someone crying out like, please, please just stop. And the thing is, I can't stop settler violence. They're not waiting for my next sermon, you know. Even though I was blamed for October 7th because lots of people said, oh, Hamas listened to your Yom Kippur sermon, and that's why they thought they had permission to do, yeah. But the fact is, none of those guys are listening to me, so I can't stop them. But what I can do is in my own community and in our own communities, we can speak out in a clear moral voice and say that this behavior is atrocious, that this is a violation of everything holy for us as a people. And that is also a form of self-criticism. And I think that that is a discourse. It's a shift in the discourse that this Smol Emuni community is partially responsible for, and thank God for you. And I want to share that when we had a small Smol Emuni gathering in Los Angeles, it was like 25 people with whispered invitations, and people walked into someone's living room and just started like tearing up saying, you too? You also care? You also have a heart for Palestinian suffering, and you love Israel, and you want to fix this? And it like, thank God for what you're doing, and thank you for what you're doing and what you're all doing. In the Jackson funeral, there was a beautiful book that they put out of like teachings and reflections on Reverend Jackson, and he called himself part of the disobedient faithful. Whenever I say I'm going to Smol Emuni, people say, what's that? And I try to figure out how do you actually explain it, and I'm sure we've all had this problem. He called himself part of the disobedient faithful. And I feel like this is the disobedience. Like, we must not abide by the script that is built on fear that prevents us from speaking the truth. And that means the people of Carmel are not going to hear me, right? They're going to come down and uproot those olive trees. And if I stand there and say no, I'm going to get arrested. And it's worth getting arrested every now and then. They're not going to stop because of me. But we collectively change the discourse in the diaspora and in the land, and that will have an impact. And so that self-criticism is absolutely essential from my vantage point. Even though we're not talking to the perpetrators of the violence, we are talking as a community saying we will no longer stand for this.
Yes. I actually want to go back to a moment in which Rabbi Sharon, Brous, and I were by Carmel in Al-Khir. And we went there with a group of activists, and we met with Palestinian leadership of the community. And Rabbi Brous did something that I couldn't understand, really. She went up to the soldiers and tried talking to them. You remember?
Yeah, because they're like our kids, right? I mean, they're like our nephews, and I mean...
But I thought it was a dangerous, crazy action to do. I really saw you going there, talking to them, and the only thing I wanted to do is to prevent you from going to talk to these soldiers. And going back to this exact moment is where I want to self-criticize myself, right? How much I talk in rooms like that, surrounded by people who feel and share my values, and how much I actually try to get closer or to be in interaction with people who see things completely different than I am. And it's so difficult. When I started my position at NIF, one of the first things I did, because I was innocent and young and didn't understand everything, I went to like right-wing media and spoke to all the people that I would never talk to now. Because I felt like if they just hear me, right? If they just know what I have to say, they will understand that we don't share the same, values exactly, or our vision of the state of Israel is not exactly, but they'll get that I'm coming from a good place. So I don't believe that anymore. You do it once, you do it twice, and then you understand you're a fool. But I do think that there is not enough work in my personal environment of reaching out, of trying to talk to people that need to hear us. And at first they will not agree with us. I know it, I have it with my personal parents again. But I really feel that there is something in this interaction with the people that we actually need to do at the end of the day change with, that we have to continue working. It's never going to work if we're only going to sit in a room and convince ourselves we are right. And it's true about Jews with Jews, Palestinians with Palestinians, Jews and Palestinians. This interaction of Sharon going to these soldiers when we are in Al-Khir, just under Carmel settlement, knowing clearly who is bad and who is good, right? Our ideology and who we are with our values are very clear. But coming and having this conversation is something that I want to see my community do more. And it's difficult and very unpleasant, but it's so much needed in the world in which we live today. And that's the only way at the end of the day that I think change will happen. So thank you for this teaching. We haven't talked about it ever, but it was really memorable, and that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to tell you that as an academic, it will be the most boring answer of all four. I love to read, and I feel that the first step for me to change is to read. Today in the morning, a very famous Palestinian historian, writer, really a pillar of our community, passed away. Walid Khaldi. Walid passed away. Yes. Walid passed away at an age of 101. And I can tell you, he made every day of his life matter. Growing up in Saudi Arabia, I read his books. Those were the ones accessible to me. And when I came to the US, there is like a whole world. Like I even wrote a piece in JAMA about capturing life. Like I felt I need to read everything, do everything, learn every sport, listen to every music. But on Read Everything, I wanted to read books that were not allowed in Saudi Arabia. I wanted to read books from other perspectives than mine so that I can grow my perspective. And over the past 2 years, I have to tell you, I've been reading voraciously books from all sides discussing our region. I read Exodus, and that was a very interesting book.
Even Jews don't read Exodus anymore.
But I did not recognize the Palestinians. They're talking about our food is disgusting. Isn't it now the Israeli food, you know, between falafel and hummus and tabbouleh? And the people who are so dirty, and I'm thinking, dirty? Have you met my mother? Like, we clean everything with Q-tips, and they're ugly, they're this, and that. I think I look like Julia Roberts. So nothing in there really fit. But one of the very interesting books was Ari Shavit's book, My Promised Land. And in a way, it was very different than a lot of conversation I engaged in with some of my Jewish friends and Israeli friends over the years, in which we compared notes. What did they know? What did I know? And all of a sudden, I'm reading a book of someone from Israel who knew what I knew. And he's saying exactly what I learned growing up, but he's saying it defiantly, saying that, yes, we kicked you out of your homes. Yes, we bombed Safad before any Arab army come to the area. It's not in response, it's preemptive. So my father's recollection at the age of 8 was correct. Yes, we did this to you. Yes, we did that. Yes, because we will never be powerless again. And throughout the book, there's a lot of sharing of all the successes the Israeli country, community, people were able to achieve, which is wonderful. But at the same time, there is that sense of defiance that we've achieved this while doing something wrong to the Palestinians because that's the only way. And I don't think so. I really don't think so. And he ends the book with the same defiance that we know there will be no peace. We know we will never stop fighting the Palestinians, but we know that that is the price to have this very successful Israel. And it's such a sad vision. So basically, he's destining all Israelis to perpetual fear because that's the only way they can be safe. So to answer your question, I think reading and knowing the actual story, what happened, what did my people do wrong? Why did they make the wrong decisions? Who sent Yasser Arafat to Oslo? Who did this? Like we have faults on our side as well. And there are bad decisions that were made on your side as well. And where do we go from here? So while we were in our prep session, we had only one prep session, I shared a teaching from Prophet Muhammad that I really like, and I think it instructs me in my daily life. And I'll read you the translation. I can say it in Arabic, but I'll read you the translation. You know it by heart. I know it by heart. Oh, I can say it in Arabic if you want.
We do, please.
In Arabic, Rasul Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam قال من رأى منكم منكرا فليغيره بيده فإن لم يستطع فبلسانه فإن لم يستطع فبقلبه وذلك أضعف الإيمان. So he said, whomever among you sees an injustice or evil, let them change it with their hand. If they can't, then with their tongue. If they can't, then with their heart. And that's the weakest of faith. I hope we can do more than the weakest of faith. I'm here to speak, but me and Noam and Neil and Barbara and so many of my friends are also doing. And that is how change happens. Thank you.
We're going to start circulating microphones to gather questions from the audience, and while that gets situated, I'll comment to Dr. Ansari about a couple of things she said that I actually think are really extremely practically relevant to educating about this, and I appreciate your raising them. I will preemptively ask the questioners to please keep your questions to questions and keep them brief, and we'll try to collect a couple at a time and present them to the panel. So I'll say two things that you said that actually struck me. I'm a high school educator, as really profoundly practical things that we can do in educating and talking to the next generation. The second one, we'll start with the second one, why not go out of order? The second one was that you said this is not some existential, eternal, two religions clash of. It's actually an Israeli scholar named Daniel Bartal who's written a book called Intractable Conflicts, which is as long as an intractable conflict, and it's also, I guess, unlike intractable conflicts, quite dull, but really, really important. And because what he talks about, he has studied supposedly intractable conflicts all over the world, and he talks about the features of an intractable conflict and the way we talk about it. And as I was reading this book, it was like a really painful shock of recognition, because the things we say, these are two people who have always been at war, the other side only understands violence, this is the only way you can communicate with them, they hate us more than they love their own children. It's like you could tick those things off of a list. But he's not studying Israel-Palestine. He's studying Northern Ireland, and he's studying Sri Lanka, and you realize that this is in fact a pattern that we are playing out, and it is not in fact some immutable truth. And if we teach that, there is a conflict here, and it has a history, and it has a trajectory that it has taken, and it is not some inevitable, determined, this has been thus forever, and so it will be thus forever. And it is actually the product of a lot of contingency and a lot of human choices over the past whatever amount of time, and we can think differently and make different choices. That is actually something really important to be able to educate and speak to and teach and say. Because if it was ever thus, and it will ever be thus, then what is any of us doing here? And if we can talk about it differently and think about it differently. So that was the second thing. And the first thing was when you talked about your own family's story, history, and experience. Every time I have this experience of talking to Palestinians and hearing the way in which their stories and narratives and family experiences in so many ways echo ours, it is with this, not the, oh, I met somebody and they were nice. You could think somebody is nice and still deeply dislike the people they're part of. We know lots of people have the one individual Jew they like, they just don't like Jews. It's not about that. It's not I met an individual and they're nice. It's that I heard somebody's story and I understand that their story in so many ways echoes, rhymes with, is so similar to my story. And that helps me understand a perspective in a way, understand the community, understand an experience, understand the history in a way that's so different than I did once. So there are a number of experiences like this that I've had. I'll tell you the one that was, in its way, I guess, the most dispiriting. We had a Palestinian Israeli, now Palestinian American speaker, writer, comedian, Said Kashua, once came to speak in my modern Orthodox Jewish high school. And I thought this was an unbelievable experience. To have the students here, Palestinian talking his own voice about his own experience, and he's speaking in English to my students. It's like super accessible to them. And he's telling them, after 1948, my grandmother always kept a suitcase packed because she never knew when she might have to flee again. And he said to us, my grandparents and your grandparents, they had that same suitcase packed. And I got chills, and I'm looking at the room at my students, and they're high school students. We brought them into the room to listen to a speaker, and some of them are sitting there nothing against my high school students, one of whom is in the room right now, and they're sitting there slouched with their hoodies over their heads, doing what high school students do when you bring them to hear a speaker. So I'm not pretending that's the be-all and end-all of everything. You bring in one speaker, they will be as moved as I was. But it's beginning that, opening up the ability to hear other people's experiences and know them, as you talked about so powerfully, which I think begins to open up. And that doesn't negate, none of that takes away from our own experiences and our own pain and our own suffering, any more than our experiences, pain and suffering negate your family's experience. It's understanding that there are two stories here and they both exist here, and somehow we have to be able to hold and grant both of them. And so I think those things actually are not, pie in the sky, or we'll just have to do better, or abstractions. Those are actually two very concrete things that we can commit to doing in our communal spaces, in our educational spaces, in our ritual spaces, in our religious spaces, how we talk about this and whom we talk to and whom we hear from. That's really powerful, so thank you for that. Now, we're gonna take 3 questions, so if we have 3 microphones about, and then we will ask the panelists to answer any one of them if they feel like answering, or all of them.
Yes, thank you very much. I really appreciated a lot of the comments about self-reflection and self-criticism, especially from Rabbi Seidler-Feller and from Rabbi Brous. And my question is, how do you balance self-criticism without becoming someone who's labeled as beyond the pale, who's just written off as one of those people who's speaking, as a Jew? So how do you do that self-criticism in a way that people in your own side will actually listen to it?
Great, thank you. Next question.
Okay. First, I want to thank all of you for your insights. It's going to be a question that incorporates Rabbi Brous and Rabbi Seidler-Feller and Dr. Ansari's points. I'm inclined towards similar critiques about the religious soul of Judaism and how Zionism has co-opted it. But I have reservations about saying that we're fighting for the soul of Judaism when many of us live in communities with unabashed Zionists who say very unproductive and bigoted things, but whose experiences of Judaism are certainly still very captivating of the neshama. So this statement of Judaism, it's hard to claim, especially keeping in mind Dr. Ansari, your point about really the Nakba being kind of this untractable sin of Zionism, in which to undo it kind of necessitates perhaps the dissolution of the state. Many people, I feel like, don't realize this, but the masses that have taken to the streets in recent years in our city, New York City, and in cities across the country, have realized this, and they've accomplished a tremendous political victory that I believe many years of talking about the philosophical and religious soul of Judaism haven't, and that is that AIPAC is no longer a viable political strategy for progressive candidates. That's a tremendous, tremendous political victory. My question, thus, which is now coming, is in light of this fact, why do you, Rabbi Seidler-Feller, and you, Rabbi Brous, feel that this theological work is still important and productive? And I want to preface this too with saying that I feel like Talmidei Chacham should be respected today, and we are instructed to sit at the feet, the dust at the feet of Talmidei Chachamim, and to drink in their words with thirst. So I respect the work that you are all doing tremendously, and I want to preface with that, and my question remains, the theological work, why is it important?
Okay. Sure. Last question, and then we'll open it up to the panelists to address some of them.
Okay. I'm going to break with long-standing Jewish tradition and lead with a question. And it's really for any or all of the panelists. What is one practical thing you are committing now to work for Israel in 2048? And just to give a little background, I am deeply, deeply concerned that we are morally injuring ourselves as a people. Moral injury is more and more being defined as a violation of spirit, the violation of a deep sense of right and wrong. So, for instance, I'm trying to work for, in Israel in 2048, free of the somaticized version of moral injury.
My own work is leading towards looking at moral injury somaticized in heart disease. In the same way that we now more or less accept that chronic stress can lead to somaticization in cancers.
Thank you. So the three questions that we have are, how do you avoid, as you do this work, being labeled as outside the tent or as a Jew or as a rabbi, meaning that you're seen as somebody who only capitalizes on their position to make statements that are outside the normative bounds of the community? What is the value of doing this theological work when the political work seems to have moved the football down the field? And what is one practical thing that you are working towards for Israel for 2048? So any of our panelists want to take, we don't have to have all panelists speak to all of those questions. If there's something particular you feel like you could speak to, please do.
I'll answer in a way that hopefully will address all of the questions at the same time. So I'll tell you a story. So in 1835, my fourth grandfather left the city of Fas in Morocco and went to do the pilgrimage. And pilgrimage was, until 1948, people, if they have the means, they would visit the 3 holy mosques. So he would do the rituals in Mecca, and then travel north to Medina, and then travel north to Al-Quds, the holy. Quds means the holy, Jerusalem, correct? To basically make his pilgrimage holy. We are Sufis from Morocco who settled basically in Safad, the city of the mystics, the Sufis, the Kabbalahs in Palestine. And the only reason my grandfather settled there is because of an earthquake that happened in 1837, and his kids died. So he ended up marrying not 1, not 2, not 3, 4 Palestinian women to populate his family again. But this story is to tell you so many things. On the one hand, I think religion is a great thing. Be it Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, there's so much plagiarism. It's almost identical, basically, if you look at the teachings of morals. And I think having that moral compass as the base for doing good in the world is a good thing. So I would always embrace religion in my mystical Sufi way. The second thing is, people had come to this very important nexus between 3 continents throughout history for thousands of years. When the Jewish community crossed from Egypt and made it finally to Palestine, there were 7 nations there. It wasn't an empty piece of land. And people have been going back and forth, and some have stayed there for a long, long time. So the issue is, what happened to people who came in the past and stayed there? Did people wage a war against them? Did people kill them? Did people hate them? That was not the case. People who came there were received there and were loved there and stayed there. And we are one of these families that lived there for 113 years before 1948. But we came expecting love. We found love. We didn't come expecting animosity and to kick people out of their land. So we did not get animosity. So religion is important, history is important, and making the right choices. And it's never too late to change how we're approaching each other. There is a way for us to live together, and that way is put love, you receive love. I'm going to tell you something scientific maybe, and because I'm a physician, and here Noam is a scientist as well. The medium matter. If you put cells in a certain medium, a type of receptors, culture end up growing basically in these cells. You put a child, they did it in twin studies. You put 2 twins, each in a different culture, in a different environment. They grow very differently. We put Palestinians in a place where they're the enemy, they're the hated, I wish we were animals. Honestly, the way I saw Palestinians being treated were like insects would not be treated that way. We put them in that place. This is the environment we're putting them in. We should not expect that we will get something that we like to see. there is a self-fulfilling prophecy in this. And the same I would say from me. As a Palestinian, if every time I'm encountering someone Jewish, I would expect that he will hate me, I'm going to do what it takes for me to see that hate. But if I encounter them and say, let's see what's in common between us, and I'm sure he will like me because I'm so likable, they will like me. And some people did not, and that's okay, but many did. So I think we give to the world what we want to receive, and I hope we all give what we want to receive. Thank you.
I'm going to ask, since I'd like us to have the chance to take another round of questions and the hour draws late, I'm going to ask the panelists to please confine yourself to 90 seconds.
Okay, briefly. All right. Number one, on self-criticism, getting people to listen. So first of all, you have to be willing to face rejection. All right? It gets hot in the kitchen sometimes, and if you say things that people aren't happy with, you know, you're going to get a response. However, just out of experience, there's a way of being critical with love. I think we made a mistake in not educating young people from the very beginning in how to relate to Israel, because we presented Israel as flawless. Nothing is flawless. So from the very beginning, we didn't give people the means to confront the reality. They were confronting a dream. And the dream was in daytime television and real politics. So if we had learned from the very beginning that which we value involves the ability to be critical of that which we value, maybe it would have been a different outcome. Can we reclaim that now? I think it's possible. You do it with a sense of passion and commitment, and then people will start to listen to you. Not everybody, number one. Number two, religion. I think there's a lot to be said. First of all, much of what's going wrong today is perpetrated by a religious establishment that has grabbed the reins of leadership in Israel. So religion needs to be part of the response, because religion is part of the problem. But beyond that, I've actually come to the conclusion, and this is in general, my general view, I'm a rabbi, so it has to do with what I value. I understand the fact that a relationship with God is essential to my humanity. And it's essential because it should be, I'm not saying that it is, it should be a guarantor of some humility. And humility is a critical dimension if we're going to be able to proceed politically into resolution. And it seems to me that nations, one of the things that we can bring, religious people can bring to political discussions, because politics is about power and assertion of one's control and dominance and all sorts of other things that are involved in competition. Religion can introduce into the conversation a different type of moral a sense of self that can be helpful, could be helpful, should be helpful. And that's exactly where religion has gone wrong, because it's become the handmaiden of the politicians, as it has been throughout history. Can there be, that's the question that we're faced. We claim that Judaism is different. Really? Can it be different? Can it promote a type of national humility in distinction from other nations? That's where religion plays a role. And practically speaking, people know from the former workshop that I did that I look towards and work towards a land for all as a way of achieving the values that we're talking about. And the values that, by the way, recognize secular and religious involvement, Palestinians, settlers, West Bank, Gaza, all talking to one another. It's amazing. The first joint board meeting of a land for all between the Palestinian board and the Jewish board was scheduled for October the 10th. And it took place. It took place because the people on the board realized there's nothing else. We need to talk to one another. So practically, you're invited to join in. There are movements on the ground. Eretz Kulam, a land for all, is not the only one. There are coexistence movements. We should be devoting our time positively and constructively. I actually felt, I'm sorry for saying one more thing, which is I spent a lot of my time being a critic. I got tired of myself. It's hard to be constantly a critic. It really diminishes yourself. It's really important to embrace something constructive and positive. People are interested in building a new reality, and they're working with one another across borders. We should run to support those activities. It'll transform us, it'll make us better human beings, and it might actually make a change on reality on the ground.
"90 seconds. Okay.
Whatever.
I think after 25 years of friendship with my beloved Shifra Bronznick, I have learned that my goal is not to be liked by everybody. But I do, but I don't need to be liked, but I do need to be heard. And so we have to share our message in a way that people can hear us. And I think that's really important because there are a lot of people in our ecosystem who are saying the right thing, but in a way that feels like it's fueling the toxicity rather than helping heal. And I don't want to contribute to that ecosystem. There's enough toxicity in the air here in our time. And so how can you bring more light than heat? That's what I'm asking. It happens to be that my criticism of the policies of the State of Israel come from the deepest place of love in my heart. They come both from my love of our Jewish people and my actual family that lives in Israel, and also our broader Jewish family, and also my deep love for my Palestinian cousins, who I share Michael, and I want to just amplify what Michael said earlier. He does not harbor a fantasy of the Palestinians not being a part of Israel, but rather of us together building a shared society. And I have heard so many Israelis say that, and I echo that voice as an American and diaspora Jew. Our dream is to share this place. And so when I speak, it really does come from love, and also not everyone can hear it, but my goal is actually to be heard. And last, about the theology, I'll just say very briefly, it is the most basic principle of Jewish theology that every human being is created in the divine image, that the death of one innocent is therefore a moral catastrophe. A moral catastrophe. If you look in the third parak of Masechet Ta'anit, what causes a national fast, every single person in the country fasts, that 2 children might be endangered. And everybody fasts because the life of an individual human is the most precious thing for us. I will not give up. That is for me the guiding force of my politics, of my morality, of my sense of understanding of self and other, is that I really believe in the preciousness of every single human life, and I will fight for that to be made manifest in the world.
I'll try to be very brief, and I actually gonna echo what was said here, but I actually want to say something in addition to the point, what about your role in the community? There's certain times in history to choose to be silent is a sin. It's something you cannot allow yourself doing. You have to be speaking up even though you feel like you're speaking to yourself. You need to be in action even if you feel like you're completely being pushed away from the room. I think that the most important thing is for people to be able to hear you, but at the same time allowing yourself to be silent in times like that, it's completely wrong. And I think that even this kind of question would not be reason in a more kind of like right-wing or extreme right-wing environment, because they do and they talk and they hope and they know people will follow them. So please, this is a time in history in which we cannot be silent. And whoever can hear us, let them hear us. But at the same time, for us to see the reality as we see it and to be silent, it's just a complete sin. And I'm using a religious term, although I'm not a religious person. And it goes, I mean, I did it already. I'm not going to touch the theology. I'm just going to say we have to talk to people where they are in the way that some people need to have a theological kind of discussion in order to understand what we're trying to say. Some of them are much more political and they need to have a political voice guiding them. Some of them need to go through educational process and we need to go through the education system to do so. I think that we are at times that we can't choose the way we talk to people. We just need to be doing that and getting them into action. And for me, it's, you're not going to get me through your theological discourse. That's totally fine. But there are so many people who are so connected to their religious perspective that just giving up on that path is just looks like a political mistake. Action and what needs to be happened. I mean, that's the easiest thing for me to say. I live in Israel and I'm engaged in an organization that I truly believe that everything that we do is in order to make Israel a better place for Israelis, Jews and Palestinians, and Palestine a better place for Palestinians at large. And I think that being involved and connected to people that not only think about what is right, but are involved in action on the ground actually is the only way to actually feel that you are valuable in times that you really feel that everything is just beyond you. So those are my points.
I have been informed by Rachel, who's the real boss here, that we don't have time for any more questions. And so I'm going to say a few words to close out this panel and yield back the mic. I am actually, by profession, an American history teacher. That's most of what I do, and so I think a lot by analogies to American history. And one of the things that I say to my students about being in the work of effecting change is just realizing what the time scale that we are talking about often is. There are lots of potted, overly neat histories we tell our students. One of the potted, overly neat histories we tell our students is that Rosa Parks sat on a bus, and then Martin Luther King had a dream, and then there was the Civil Rights Act, and it's all good. And it took from 1955 to 1964, and we're all done. And of course, if you talk about the history of the fight in the United States of America for legal, social, political equality for Black Americans, it is a much longer story. The fight takes a much longer time. The Seneca Falls Convention is in the 1840s. Women get the right to vote after World War I. Women don't get full civil, legal equality in the United States until decades after that. We're talking about being in it if you know you are working towards something that needs to happen for the very long haul, and that very long haul is sometimes on a scale that exceeds a lifespan, which can be dispiriting and demoralizing, but maybe it's more dispiriting and demoralizing if you think that the change comes around at the scale of one presidential term or one decade, and when it doesn't happen, you're like, well, I guess that didn't work, so throwing up our hands. And having that understanding, knowing that it looks like to be in it for the long haul, shapes how we are in it. It means we build coalitions because no one person can do the work alone. It means sometimes we say, I'm tired now and I'm stepping back. And if we remember if we're going to do our old lefty organizing songs, when your fingers can strum no longer, hand your guitar to someone stronger, right? Sometimes that's what we need to do. And it means we need to sometimes look back. Sometimes when my young students with fires in their bellies come to me and say, nothing makes any difference, I say to them, I'm old enough to remember 30 years ago. So I can tell you the ways in which things have changed, and things are different from 30 years ago. And even feels like it's not changing enough. And that doesn't mean that sometimes things don't go backwards. That happens too. Because it turns out that it's a nice thought to think that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But as Ta-Nehisi Coates said, it doesn't always bend unless we bend it. He actually said it doesn't bend unless we bend it. Certainly doesn't always bend unless we bend it. All of those things are true, and thinking about the work that has to be done that way and thinking about doing it that way, and also thinking, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor v'lo ata ben chorin libatel mimena, the work is not yours to finish, but that doesn't mean that you are free to exempt yourself from it. It means thinking about what it looks like to do this work together for the long haul. And I'm sure in violation of all the things you're supposed to do here, I'm going to end by saying what that work is not. There's a lot of things the work could be. Here's the one thing I know the work is not. The work is not yelling at other people on social media. That's not doing any work. It makes you sad, dispirited, anxious, and unhappy. It accomplishes absolutely nothing. And odds are at least 50-50 that the person you're desperately trying to convince is in a troll farm somewhere in offshore. So don't do that. Put down your phone. Get out into the real world. It's great to meet people at gatherings like this because that builds a sense of solidarity and community, and it's great to meet people in other settings who don't already agree with you that you can talk to and hear from and listen to and engage with and meet with them where they are. So if they want to hear you talk about religion, you can talk about religion, and meet people from different communities and different perspectives and different backgrounds and talk to them and genuinely listen to them. And when somebody says, my nephew, my brother, my former student, my son is in the IDF, to say, let me hear about them and let me hear about their story also, because that's also part of the stories that we're hearing. And when somebody says, religiously, this is very hard for me to say, let me hear about you and let me hear about your story. And now let me share with you my story and my perspective and my point of view, because it's ultimately that in interacting. And some of you will have the ability to do that work on larger scales, right? Organizationally and structurally, communally. And some of us are just digging in the dirt where we are, planting seeds, digging dirt, planting seeds, growing where we're planted. Just another phrase from the Civil Rights Movement, which seems to be getting a lot of shouting outs today. So there is a great deal of work to do, and we feel the imperative that we do it. And the time scale in which it may happen is long, and sometimes we may get tired or frustrated, but honestly, what alternative do we have? Thank you. Thank you so very much to all of our panelists. Thank you, Mickey. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Eman. Thank you, Chaim.
Thank you all. First of all, we have a wallet of Nava Friedman. Does anyone know Nava Friedman? I know it's been a really long day, and can I implore you to stay just a few more minutes for me to close out, if that's okay with you. I know, oh, there's also a hat. I know it's been hard, it's been challenging, it's been exciting, it's been infuriating. I think, first of all, I want to acknowledge that we did something that is quite rare in our community, which is to sit with people who agree with some of what we agree with and disagree with some of what we think, and to listen carefully and honestly and attentively and with empathy. And so I want to first thank all our incredible speakers, the Israelis, the Palestinians, the Americans, the rabbis, the educators, the activists, the journalists, the professors, the doctors, the students, the parents, the lawyers, the musicians. I'm sure I forgot some. And I want to thank all of you, our new and fresh and growing Smol Emuni US community, and our Smol Emuni movement here and in Israel and in Europe and maybe soon to be in Australia. We got some emails from people. This community of people who feel rooted in Torah and in Judaism and who believe that every human being has been created b'tzelem Elokim, in the image of God, and therefore deserves dignity and equality and freedom. And I'm not very good at this, but I also want to say we try to look very serious. We have great social media with like an amazing team, and we have a great photography team, and we put together a great like first year annual report, and we send lots of emails, and we look like a really great, serious organization, and we're really, you know, me, a full-time volunteer, and Rachel, part-time director of programming, and Galia, part-time person, and a few people who helped in this last month for the conference. So we're really like a scrappy shoestring budget organization, and if you feel like what we're doing is important, please help us, join us, help us both financially and communally to be able to further this work that we feel is really deeply meaningful. Before I say a few more words, I just also want to not forget and thank all the people that helped us here. And I want to thank NIF again for both helping sponsor this day and for sponsoring drinks for the young folks. Don't forget to join them if you feel like that's your group at around 6 o'clock. I want to again thank our partners and inspiration, Smol Emuni in Israel, and especially Michael. Your vision is creating a growing movement here and in Israel and around the world. Your activism puts your own bodies in harm's way, and your Torah and theology is a beacon of Jewish moral leadership. Your educational programs are touching people, and we feel honored and fortunate to be your partners. And I also wanted to thank our own Smol Emuni team, Galia, Lindsay, Hannah, Solomon, Musia, Benjamin, Tilza, and Arnold. And a special, deep, heartfelt thank you to Rachel Landsberg, who manages so much. Thank you for Smol Emuni with me and with all of us. I want to just say a few words to close. We chose, as you have heard from all of us too many times, the Pasuk from Tehillim, Sur mera עשהטוב, bakesh shalom v'rodfehu. Shun evil, swerve from evil, do good, seek peace, and pursue it. We opened the day with Sur mera. We then moved to עשהטוב, and you see I'm even skipping. And now we come to bakesh shalom v'rodfehu. What does that demand from us, and how can we actually seek peace, and pursue it? In Perek HaShalom, the chapter of peace of Derech Eretz Zuta, a text dating back probably to the Talmudic time, we read, Taman tanenan Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Omer al shlosha dvarim ha'olam kayam. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, there are three things that endure the world. Al adin, al ha'emet, ve'al shalom. Justice, truth, and peace. Rabbi Muna said, V'shloshtam davar echad hem. And those three are actually one thing. Shloshtam davar echad hem. Nasa adin, nasa emet, nasa shalom. Because if you do justice and truth is done, you will have peace. The world endures on these three things: justice, truth, and peace. And they are not separate things. They're not separate pursuits. They're intertwined and dependent on one another. So we seek peace, and the peace requires both justice and truth. And this is especially difficult at this moment we're living through. We're in the midst of yet another brutal war, and we pray for the safety of Israelis and everyone else in Israeli armed forces and American armed forces. And we worry about American safety and Jewish safety and Palestinian safety and anti-Semitism. And many Jews, especially Orthodox and observant Jews, struggle to hold moral clarity while feeling these deep connections to our different parts. And within part of our Orthodox community, voices that were once marginal have become loud and normalized, calling to flatten Gaza, statements describing Palestinians as Amalek, enthusiasm for the death penalty, or attempts to block humanitarian aid. And statements of this kind are often coming from people who wear kippot. On Yom Yerushalayim, we see children dance to the kotel, singing, "May your village be destroyed." Here in the United States, these voices may be a little softer, but they still exist. And too often, we avoid confronting the uncomfortable truth and focus on things that are simpler. Hostages, Nova survivors, displaced people from the Otef, and these are all good causes, and we can all support them. We maybe rationally acknowledge the green line, yet many of us will debate and probably allow our kids to go to a gap year program that's on the other side. This kind of smoltification of Judaism echoes loudly, partly because of our own silence. So we seek peace, but peace requires truth and justice. Just a little under a year ago, Smol Emuni launched in the US with our first conference. We chose the name, as we said in the early video, to show our connection to this grassroots growing movement of a Smol Emuni in Israel and around the world. The success of that conference made it clear to us that we were not alone, that there was a community of observant Jews who were looking to hear our voice and who did not feel represented in their shuls and in their schools and in their JCCs and among the other Jewish institutions. Smol Emuni gave us an identity and a community and a home of sorts and empowers us to speak up. Together, we heard lectures, learned Torah, signed petitions, rallied, watched films, and chanted slichot and kinot over this last year. We're creating a home for those seeking an authentic, Torah-based voice that affirms human dignity for all. Our work is not only to shape our Orthodox and observant community here in America. We believe that it will resonate wider and broader in the Jewish world and among our family and friends in Israel. Sorry. Together, we must amplify the voices of our tradition that reflect our values and create new ones to meet the moment. I'm not naive. I know our tradition has all kinds of voices. Some of them celebrate power, some of them celebrate compassion. For every midrash celebrating domination, we can bring another voice celebrating mercy and humility. When someone quotes to you, he who is kind to the cruel will end up being cruel to the kind, we can always answer with another teaching. Walk in God's ways. Just as God is merciful, so too you should be merciful. And to those who call for vengeance, one can always quote the pasuk, Lo tikom velo titor, you shall not be vengeful and should not bear a grudge. And to those who admire power, political, financial, or social, we can remind them the words that we say every day, some of us 3 times a day, at the end of the Amidah, ולמקללי נפשי תדום, ונפשי כעפר לכל תהיה. I made a mess. And to my soul, may my soul be silent to those who curse me, and let my soul be like the dust to all, a voice of deep, deep humility. So what is our task now as observant Jews when voices claim to represent authentic Judaism promote cruelty and domination? I personally understand these challenges through the languages that speak to me. And I know this is a little idiosyncratic, but give me a few more moments. The 2 languages are psychoanalysis and teshuvah. Freud taught that we are haunted not only by the trauma itself, but by the repression of that trauma. When we cannot acknowledge the painful truth about our own families or about society, those unspoken realities continue to shape us from the shadows, preventing us from thriving. My favorite psychoanalyst, Hans Lowald, offered a beautiful phrase. The work of analysis is to transform ghosts into ancestors. We cannot change the past, but until we can confront the trauma we experienced, or the past that we regret, or the traumas that we have inflicted, we will be ruled by their unconscious power. Our collective pasts, October 7th, the war that follows, 1967, 1948, the Holocaust, maybe even Churban Bet HaMikdash, these events are part of who we are. They are part of our past. But we can acknowledge them honestly, and perhaps those ghosts will stop haunting us and become part of our heritage, becoming our ancestors. Put in another Jewish language, this process is called teshuvah. The Rambam Maimonides teaches that sins between people cannot be forgiven by God. One must repair the harm done and seek forgiveness from the ones one has wronged. I do not know fully how we do that. I don't know how we fix the wrongs we have done in words, in deeds, in political choices. But I believe that we cannot do teshuvah unless we begin acknowledging the harm that has been done and begin the long work of restoring what is owed: freedom, dignity, and equality. For the Rambam, just as for Freud and Lowell, the first step is acknowledgement. In the language of teshuvah, that is called vidui, the act of publicly speaking, of public confession. Perhaps this is where our work, all of ours, in Smol Emuni US, begins. Not with certainty, not with a perfect solution, but with the courage to tell the truth. If we can do that, if we can face our history honestly, if we can hold justice, truth, and compassion together, then perhaps the ghosts of our past will begin to loosen their hold on us. And perhaps then we will finally be able to be truthful to the commandment that guided our conference. Sur mera, עשהטוב, בקש שלום ורודפהו. Thank you.